Should the NHL consider changing its current playoff format? I have some thoughts how they could change it, include more teams, and it wouldn't extend the playoffs by very much at all. I'll give you my thoughts coming up next. And welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, let's discuss the current NHL playoff format. Should they consider making some changes? It seems to be a little bit of a hot topic lately, with the general manager meetings expected to get underway here very shortly. It seems to be a topic that's going to be discussed, and I've seen lots of chatter in the media lately around what options the NHL should be considering. Should they leave the format as is? Should they make it so that there's more teams? Should they make it so that the format is just different and let the same number of teams, but maybe go back to the 1 through 8 ranking system that we used to have? What's the best thing here? Obviously, there's a lot of people that think with the current playoff format that we see too many powerhouse teams hitting each other in the first and second round, and that maybe some teams have an easier path to get to the conference finals or the Stanley Cup championship, and that maybe it's not the most fair way to go about doing things. Well, certainly I would say after a long time of the 1 through 8 system myself, it did seem to be a little bit better of a system, but at the same time I do kind of enjoy the current system the way it is. The current system kind of reminds me of back in the 80s and early 90s when the before we went to the 1 through 8 system, when it was more the divisional playoffs, where you usually most of the divisions had like 5 teams and the top 4 made it, and you had to battle it out through your division to move on to the conference championship and to the Stanley Cup finals. So there's a lot more rivalries that way. The only problem with that format I find is that you get to see the same matchups a lot year after year after year, and as much as the rivalries can be entertaining, it can kind of from a fan perspective kind of get a little bit less interesting and a little bit boring as well, especially if you take a rivalry like the Pens and the Capitals and you see the Penguins beat them year after year after year. You can only take that so many times before you just don't want to see it anymore. Doesn't matter if you're a Caps fan or not. So I have some thoughts here on how we can make some changes to the playoff format. It could include more teams, but it wouldn't really alter how long the playoffs are by very little at all. And I want to get your thoughts and see what you think. So basically my thoughts here is we could expand the playoffs to 20 teams. So that allows an extra 4 teams to get into the playoffs compared to what they are today. Obviously right now we have 8 in the East, 8 in the West for a total of 16. Now basically what I'd be doing is I'd be putting a short little round ahead of the current schedule where we have the normal seedings of 1 through 8. Basically how my idea works, and I've seen this discussed by a few other places, I've done some research here on all the different thoughts on how to change the playoffs, kind of put my own twist on it, and essentially at the end of the day what I think would be best is if we take the current playoff format, now whether or not you rank the teams the way they are or you go back to the 1 through 8 system, either way I think there's pros and cons to both methods, so I'm not really sure exactly how we go about doing that. But personally, if I had to pick, I would probably go through the 1 through 8 system just to make things a little bit more fair. And I think there's a greater likelihood that we see different matchups each year, which just makes it, I think, a little bit more interesting from a fan perspective. Basically, how my team works is you kind of use the old 1 through 8 system, except you expand that list down. You ended up making it the top 10 in each conference. So how it will work is the top 6 teams get a bye past the first round. So we take that, the first round basically becomes a wild card round where you end up having the bottom 4 teams, 7 versus 10 and 8 versus 9, and you do like a play-in format where you can either do a 1 game or a small best of 3. I personally like the best of 3 format just so that each team is guaranteed 1 home game. It allows some franchises that haven't necessarily seen as much playoff hockey to experience that from a fan perspective. It gives each team that 1 extra home game, which we know is all good for revenues, and their NHL is all about the money, as we know. So it's good from that perspective, but more importantly, it gives each fan base a small taste of playoff hockey. So obviously, if they do a best out of 3, you do a home and home. You're going to have, in the third game would go to, if necessary, to the team that's ranked higher. You have 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9. The 2 teams that win become the bottom 2 seeds in the playoffs. So then you have your 1 through 8 ranking. And then obviously the top seeds, 1 and 2, are the 2 divisional winners, just like it used to be. When we had the 1 through 8 seeding system, the division winners were ranked at the top, and then the bottom ones came after. So I would still do 1 through 8, 2 divisional winners, 1, 2. Your middle teams that are guaranteed that bye in the first round, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you have that little wild card battle at the bottom here of the list quickly before the playoffs begin for your bottom 2 seeds, and then you seed 1 through 8 and you move on just like we used to. 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, and you work things out like that. Really, if you think about a best of the 3 series, they could have that done very quickly. Even if they gave them an extra day in between the games, we're looking at probably an extra 4 to 5 days. Really, if you think about how many times the NHL makes a lot of these teams play back-to-back games in a regular season, why couldn't we do it quickly in the playoffs as well? Especially if you're fighting hard for a chance to get into that round of 8 in the NHL playoffs. To me, that makes total sense. I mean, a lot of these teams, where we're talking the way they're positioned in the divisions and the conference, they're likely going to be fairly close in proximity anyways. So for them to do game 1, maybe give them a day break, go to game 3 in the other city, and then after that, maybe they have to do it. If game 3 is necessary, it has to go back to the other city and do it back-to-back. I mean, we see that happen all the time anyway. So then you're only looking at about a 4-day schedule where a maximum of 3 games are played, and then the teams from there move on to the next round. So let me know, what do you think of that? Do you think if we change the playoffs to allow 20 teams in, you'd have 6 in each conference, basically guaranteed a bye past the wild card rounds, what I'd call it, and then you'd have that bottom 4, 7 through 10, ballot out either in a 1-game or a 3-game format to play their way into the next round of the playoffs, and then you'd go back to the 1 through 8 seeding and go on from there. Now, just to give you an idea, if you want to compare the 1 through 8 seeding compared to how they do it today, if you look at the current NHL standings, if they were to start today, and you look at, if you rank them to 2 ways, the way they go today based on their divisions, or if you just go back to the old 1 through 8 seeding with the top 2 being the division leaders. So let's take a look at how each playoff matchup would rank out, just to see how there'd be any differences. So obviously Tampa and Washington would be 1 and 2, and they're currently the division leaders. So they would still end up playing the teams that are basically considered the wild cards. We'd have the Tampa Bay Lightning playing against the New Jersey Devils, and the Washington Capitals against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now those 2 series would be the same no matter which format we went with. The middle 2, though, however, would be different based on the 2 Atlantic teams. Boston and Toronto would be outranking the 2 teams in the Metro, with the Penguins and the Flyers, so we would see some different matchups there. We'd end up seeing the Bruins against the Flyers and the Leafs against the Penguins. So obviously, you know, that would be how it would if we went to the old 1 through 8 seeding, whereas right now Boston would play Toronto and Pittsburgh would play Philly instead. So you'd have 2 the same, 2 different. So obviously there is, to a degree, there'd be some continuity with how the teams would be lined up, but at the same time, that middle part, which seems to be some pretty strong teams, that might actually work out to be a little bit theoretically better in moving forward, to allow them the best matchups, just to allow the strongest teams the best chances possible to get through. Now, I guess they always have the argument, to win the Stanley Cup and to be the best team, you have to be able to beat anyone and everyone. That's obviously the way it is, so it doesn't really matter too much for me. But I would like the old format just because it gives you a more variety of matchups year after year, just to keep things interesting. The current format for me works fine, except for the fact that sometimes you do, after a few years, you kind of get bored watching the same matchups over and over and over again, like the Pens and Capitals. So certainly leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think of my proposed playoff change to the format here. Certainly consider subscribing if you're new as well. We have daily uploads here. We cover all 31 NHL teams, so there's plenty of content for you to enjoy. If you haven't done so already, consider following us on social media. You're going to see our Twitter handle right here. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and all those social media links are down in the description, so check those out. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.